Alright, this is our next MCA lesson for 8th grade, and we have been talking about inequalities. We talked about that yesterday and today. Now we're going to talk about the part 2 of that. And there's one little twist that we add to our inequalities here, and I'm going to show you what that is. Okay, so let's read through this here. Solving inequalities is similar to solving equations, which we know. We were doing that yesterday and today. However, there is one important difference. When solving inequalities, we reverse the comparison symbol when multiplying or dividing by a negative number. Okay? So we reverse the comparison symbol when multiplying or dividing by a negative number. So with inequalities, if we ever multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to be concerned and notice what happens. So let's take a look at it. This table will help us see what happens to an inequality when we multiply or divide by a negative. So let's first of all, I know this is a lot of letters and it looks confusing. Let's break this down and help it make sense to us. Okay? So this is the properties of inequalities, and it says if A is greater than B, then all of these properties should be true. So let's come up with a couple numbers. Okay? They are telling us that all of these things are going to be true. We're not going to try and prove that. We're going to believe that they are true. In high school later on, and college and those things, you could actually prove that all of these things are true. But we'll do it with numbers. Okay. Let's choose a number A that's bigger than B. So let's say 2 is greater than 1. Why not? Let's make it easy. Okay. So we'll say A equals 2, B equals 1, and then I think, okay, C will change, but we're going to go with this. Okay, so let's say if A is 2, and B is 1, wouldn't 2 plus C, whatever C is, let's say C is 3, wouldn't this side to the left still be bigger? Okay, 2 plus 3 is 5, 1 plus 3 is 4, so this side would still be bigger, right? That would still be true, okay? So it's like, obviously if you add the same thing onto each side, and this number is bigger than the one over here, this side's still going to be bigger, okay? Same is true if you subtract the same amount from each side. What if we did 2 minus, let's use 3 again, and then 1 minus 3, okay? 2 minus 3 is negative 1, 1 minus 3 is negative 2, negative 1 is bigger than negative 2, okay? Let's try this. Now this we have to use a positive C. Alright? If we multiply by the same number and A is bigger than B, then that should also be true. Let's say, let's make C 3 again. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 3 is 3. So 6 is bigger than 3. That makes sense. Okay? Same thing if you divide by the same number. Let's use 2 and 3 again. 2 divided by 3 is 2/3. 1 divided by 3 is 1/3. 2/3 is bigger than 1/3. Okay? Now, if C is negative, things change. Our sign flips around from here to here. Alright, so let's look at that. Before we used 2 and 3 and 1 and 3, so that was 2 times 3 was bigger than 1 times 3. And that's true because 6 is bigger than 3. Okay? But now they're saying, what if C is negative? So we're going to change this to a negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is less than 1 times negative 3. Alright, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Now, negative 3 is bigger than negative 6, right? So what happened to our sign? It flipped around, it switched directions. So if we multiply by a negative, the sign flips. We're going to show that more in a second. Alright, so if we multiply by a negative, our sign flips around. So 6 is bigger than 3, yes. But if we multiply by negative 3, negative 6 now is less than negative 3. Okay? What happens if we divide by a negative? Let's use that example that we had before. 2 divided by negative 3, oh wait, by a positive 3 was bigger than 1 divided by a positive 3. Okay? But if we have a negative 3 on the bottom, that means we have 2 over negative 3 and 1 over negative 3. So the magnitudes are the same, but now this is more negative than this one is, right? So negative 1/3 is bigger than negative 2/3, whereas positive 2/3 is bigger than positive 1/3. So big idea here, your sign flips around. Let's actually take a look at that. So these properties aren't that important because this is what we use to solve on a regular basis anyway. So we're just using these to show you what we're talking about. You'll remember these things without even realizing it, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay, so let's show this again with just two numbers here. So it says multiply both sides of this inequality by -1 and explain how to preserve the truth of the inequality. Okay, oops. 6 is bigger than 5, yes? 6 is greater than 5, we know that. Now let's multiply each one by -1. So 6 times -1 equals -6. And 5 times -1 equals -5. So now we've got -6 and -5. Which one's bigger now? Well, -5 is bigger because it's less negative than -6. So what we had to do was flip our sign around, right? Before it was eating the 6, now we're going for the -5. It always wants to be pointing, or not pointing, it wants to be eating the bigger number, right? Because the alligator is hungry, alligator mouth. So 6 is greater than 5, but -5 is greater than -6. Alright, so main idea. If you multiply by a negative or divide by a negative, you need to flip that sign around. Alright, this will be our last example because we're going to cover more of this tomorrow. But here's one where we actually have to solve, and then I want a graph of it. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we are subtracting a 10 from -3x, so we want to do the opposite and add 10. Or ask ourselves what -10 gives us an 8, and it would be 18. Okay, so this and this cancel out. We've got 18 left, and -3x stays. And so far, we're good. We didn't multiply by a negative or divide by a negative. However, we're about to do that. Okay? So -3 times what gets us to 18? So we have to multiply by a negative here. -3 times -6 gives us to a positive 18, because if you multiply two negatives, you get a positive. But in order to show this step, we actually divide by a negative. We want to divide by -3 so that these two things cancel out with each other, and you're just left with x. Okay? Or 1x. I'm just going to label it x. Okay? And we also have to divide by -3 on this side. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. But now we're dividing by a negative, so this sign has to flip directions. Okay? 18 divided by -3 is -6. That would be our inequality, our solved inequality. And they also want us to graph this, and then we're going to check and see if we're okay. See if we're right. Okay, so let's graph it. Number line. A little too close for me. Dealing with negatives, so let's do this. Alright. 6, and we want everything less than. Okay, so let's do. Alright, there is no line underneath our inequality symbol, so we're going to have an open circle at -6. Open, not closed. And it says x is less than -6. So it's going to be everything back that way. Okay? So a line with the arrow pointing to the left, everything less than -6. Now let's see if we're right. Okay. I'm going to erase my work here. So I want to see our original equation, or inequality. Okay? If we're right, we should be able to choose a number that is less than -6, and this equation should work out. Okay? So a number less than -6. We're not including -6, so we can't use that one. It's not saying less than or equal to -6. So let's choose -7. -7 is less than -6. Let's see if we get, if this works out. If we choose -7, this should be true. So let's try it. -3 times -7 minus 10. That should be, this should come out to be greater than 8. So -3 times -7 is a positive 21 minus 10, we get 11. Is 11 greater than 8? Yes, it is. Okay, so that worked out. But we also want to try a number greater than -6 to see if it won't work out. So let's try -5. Now this shouldn't work out this time because it's not part of our solution set. So let's try -5. -3 times -5 minus 10. This is positive 15. Two negatives make a positive when we multiply. 15 minus 10 is 5. And 5 is not greater than 8. Okay? But we expected that not to work out because -5 is not a part of our solution set. Alright? So, main idea for this. If you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip that sign around. Notice how it started this way, but once we divided by that negative number, it flipped to the different direction. Alright, we will be talking about this more tomorrow. Thanks.